welcome back. Today I wanted to talk about a subject that I've actually been putting off through the whole of these videos, because it's probably for me the most difficult to talk about, and that's the subject of relationships. This is probably the fourth time I've recorded this, because I'm very mindful, I think, that there are people that are going to be listening to this, and other people that might be, that, you know, I'm referring to. So I don't want to be specific on anything. I want this more to be about how I have struggled with relationships, I suppose, in the past, and when I was a young adult especially, and where I am today, and sort of maybe an overview of if I'd have known I had Aspergers earlier, whether that might have changed things. So I think the reason I want to do this one now is because last week I celebrated my 9th anniversary with my current partner, and that's a big achievement for someone with Asperger's, to have a relationship with a neurotypical for that long. 8 years of those 9 years I was undiagnosed and didn't have a clue that I was on the spectrum, and we had our ups and downs, and I can look back now and I can safely say that most of our downs were caused through miscommunications, which were direct linked to my Asperger's. I got wrapped up in this whole literally speaking aspect when communicating with somebody, and there were a lot of miscommunications and misunderstandings, and my reactions were overblown and adverse to the size of the altercation or the argument. So all in all, when I look back, I think they've been, nine good years, because we've lasted that long because we've got more things in common than we haven't, and fundamentally any issues we've had haven't been big issues, but they haven't been big issues when you look at them in hindsight, and when you consider, that I've got Asperger's. They were actually small things that were attributed to my condition. So when I was a young adult, I was just coming out of my teens, so I think it was 19, 20. I'd left school at 16 and I hadn't had a girlfriend really. And as I explained in some previous videos, I was desperately trying to acquire myself a relationship, a girlfriend, to do what I thought was the right thing to do what, neurotypical people strive to do, form long-term relationships and have families and live happily ever after. So I was struggling to find somebody. Naturally, I didn't know I had Asperger's, so that was the reason why I was struggling. And I hooked up with somebody that, for their own neurotypical reasons, I think also wanted to get into a long-term relationship and start to do what was deemed, the right thing to do from a neurotypical point of view. So we kind of fell together, and we were together 13 years, that first relationship, and I've got my only daughter from that relationship. And that relationship ultimately fell down because of my inability to show emotion or affection, which are two really big things for Aspies. It was definitely a case of I was guilty as charged. I didn't do enough from a neurotypical point of view to keep the relationship alive. I was young, it was my first long-term relationship, so I didn't have those experiences either to fall back on. But it was definitely the Aspergers that prevented me from showing that person that I cared, and prevented me from showing emotions, and that person eventually, that's not what they wanted anymore. And looking back, I don't hold any grudges about that, because now I know I've got autism. It must have been extremely difficult to live with me. So I don't blame anyone for that. I think that ran its course, and I'm amazed it lasted that long, to be honest with you, being someone who doesn't find emotions and feelings very well to show or articulate. My second long-term relationship kind of fell down because of my inability to want to change routines and to socialise. She wanted us to become more than just a couple and become part of a social scene, a social circle. And that was something I dug my heels in and did not want to do. And I can't even remember the reasons why. I thought I could justify that at the time. But ultimately, that's what ended that relationship, was my inability to change the routines we were in and to be more sociable. Looking back now, obviously, having Aspergers, they were things that were massively out of my comfort zone. And I suppose, I probably had a meltdown about the whole thing when I finally split up and didn't really understand, I think, why things had to change. So the current relationship I'm in has been, as I was explaining at the beginning, it's been the best relationship I've had. It's been the most rewarding. It's had its tough times, like all relationships do, but my Aspergers has definitely brought us to the brink a couple of times, and when I look back, I can definitely attribute it to me and my inabilities to show affection, to show emotions, to the social aspect of things again. But my current partner, I think, was all round more understanding, and it's worked. And in actual fact, since my diagnosis, I don't think I'd be wrong in saying the relationship has got stronger. It's got stronger through understanding, and it's got stronger through me realising when we're having a genuine moment of my Asperger's is getting in the way, and that's the only thing that's causing us friction or causing us to argue. I can they still happen, but I think we can just get over them so much quicker now than possibly before, because my partner didn't understand why I had such adverse reactions in certain situations, and I didn't know why I was having them, so I couldn't explain them. Not that I can explain things well anyway, especially not my feelings. So the diagnosis has definitely helped. Now, if I'm to be honest, I think if I'd have got diagnosed very early, primary school or secondary school, I don't know how my relationships would have been shaped in the future. I don't know whether I'd have even had any long-term relationships, knowing that those things, living with neurotypical people and having the expectations of what they want out of a relationship would probably have been too much. And I don't know, I might never have had a long-term relationship in my life, but because I didn't know, I struggled through and I had good times and a lot of bad times early on. If I'd have known, I don't know, possibly they would have started and ended quicker or not started at all. I think it's difficult for me to answer. I think it would have had an effect. I'm just not sure what that effect would have been. But definitely the relationship I'm in now, having had 8 out of the 9 years without a diagnosis, the past years seems to have been easier. As I said, I think that comes from understanding from my partner's point of view, and it comes from me, understanding as well from my point of view that when I'm being unrealistic to neurotypical, there's certain expectations neurotypical people put on each other, the things they want from life, the things they want from relationships, the way people are expected to behave, this underlying secret world of body language and communications where you imply things without actually saying them, and then you could get accused of, well, you should have known that, you should, and I've always said to my partner before I was diagnosed, my famous line to her always was, I'm not a mind reader, I don't know, you have to tell me. And those words ring so true now I've had the diagnosis, that she knows if she does explain it to me, or she realises she hasn't explained it to me in a Aspergers kind of way, then once she's done that, if I'm still being an arsehole about it, then she can throw that back in my face and say, well, you're just being an arsehole now because I've explained it to you, So yeah, relationships are really difficult for people with Aspergers, because they contain all the things that we struggle to do. But I thought that's a subject that I had to have a little chat about. I didn't want to be too specific. Just wanted to sort of explain that since I've had my diagnosis, things have got better, and that if you're going through a similar situation, a diagnosis I think would be beneficial. If you're in a relationship and one of you thinks you're on the spectrum, then definitely get that diagnosis, because it's only going to do good. So thanks for listening again, and see you around.